get zero at the table, man, all kinds of shit breaks loose.
Pick me.
Zero's at the table, you gotta be careful. Tons of shit breaks loose, baby.
Greetings, humans, and welcome back. I'm Joey Pigtails, and this is episode number 12 of my poker journey, coming to you from Orange City Racing and Card Club. These hands are from a 1-2 PLO session played Wednesday, June 26th, and it was quite a wild session, with a few players pushing some action pre-flop, including me in a number of hands. A lot of the hands towards the end of this session are hard lessons in understanding pre-flop equities when facing players that are willing to push the aggression with marginal hands. So the hands that we choose to continue with in these situations have to be at the top of our range. They don't always go our way, but understanding which hands to go with and why is extremely important. So I hope you're able to learn a few things from this wild and crazy session. Stay tuned after the hands for a discussion on the aggressive nature of this game, as well as updates on some things going on with me personally, including a major change I've made in my life and how that change is affecting me so far. Lastly, I'll have a couple of book recommendations for you that I've found beneficial and inspiring. This session starts out with a bang and ends with an even bigger bang, so strap yourself in for some action. In the very first hand of the session, I look down at 10-10-9-7 Badoogie and limp in to get a feel for the table. There's an open of $25 on my left, a call on my right, and I go ahead and call as well. With a flop of 10-5-4-2 hearts, I flop top set with a flush and straight blocker in hand. Being out of position and listening to these guys talk aggressively with each other, I check as it seems that they are going to go to war. Sure enough, I see a bet of $75 from the player on my left, and surprisingly, the other player raises to $200. Is it my birthday or something? I stick my stack in the middle, and both of these players fold, netting me a nice $300 plus profit right off the bat. Now that's the way to start a session. From the big blind, I see a couple of limps before the button pots it to $30. I look down at Ace-9-9-2 with a nut suit and decide to come along. There are a couple more calls before a limper decides to jam for about $200, and this just isn't strong enough to make the call, so I let it go. The limper ended up having aces, which is the most obvious limp re-raise hand, so be on the lookout for this type of action in the future. It's almost always aces. Orange City now allows a straddle from any position, which is sort of jarring. The player in the hijack has decided to take this option and straddle this hand. There's one call. I call with Queen Jack-Jack 6-1 suit, and two more players come along. With a flop of King 10-9-2 clubs, I flop the nuts, so I go ahead and lead for $20 to build a pot and end up getting two calls. Turn is the Jack of clubs, giving me a set to go along with my straight, but that is not an ideal card as it brings in the flush and a higher straight, so I go ahead and check to see this check through. The river's the two of diamonds, and I check this over to see it check through again. The player on my left ends up having 3-4 clubs and takes this one down with a flush. Remember, in PLO, the nuts will frequently change on every street, so don't get married to hands. From the button, I look down at 7-6-5-3 with 3 spades. We see an open at $20, a call, I call, and both blinds come along as well. With $100 in, the flop comes 3-6-9 rainbow, and the original raiser now leads for $50 when checked to. And it's folded to me. This player has been really active and is telegraphing an overpair, so I go ahead and put him all in, expecting him to call off. And he does. Now let's get a clean run out. We have the Jack of clubs in the turn, which is a really good card, but the 9 of spades in the river is a horrible one, and I end up getting counterfeited. Sure enough, our opponent had Queen-Queen 10-3 and was drawing extremely thin. Alright. In the next hand, I limp with Ace-7-5-4, 3 clubs. The player on my left opens to 15, there are 2 calls, and I go ahead and call as well. With a flop of Ace-4-3, 2 diamonds, I flop top 2 pair and a gutter to the nut straight. The early position player leads for $25, and I call, as does the initial raiser. With $135 in, the turn is the 10 of spades, which shouldn't really change much, but does bring in the possibility of a higher 2 pair. The flop aggressor now bets the same amount on the turn, $25, which seems to be really weak. I can raise here, but the player on my left has an uncapped range, so I call to see what he does, and he ends up calling as well. If he had ace-ace, I'd expect him to pop this turn since most river cards will change the nuts. Luckily he just calls, giving us a pot of $210, and we see the river of the 4 of spades. Now the early position player leads for $75. I'm never folding when I boat up on this river, and while I don't think this player is very strong, I'm hoping he's willing to get it in like he has done before. I repot it all in for $404, and our villain now goes into the tank, but sadly ends up folding, saying he had 4-3 for a smaller boat. I need to start considering min-clicking this back or betting smaller for value. What do you think a good sizing would be? Let me know. In the next hand, we actually have a bomb pot. Queen 9-5-4 double suited in hearts and diamonds. We see flops of ace, ace, 3, 2 spades on top, and 4-4 queen, 2 clubs on the bottom, giving me a boat on the bottom board and a gutter straight draw on top and a backdoor flush draw. When checked to, I lead for $50, hoping to pull multiple players into this $120 pot, but I only end up getting one call. Sad face. Turn cards are the 8 of hearts on top, giving me a flush draw there, and an ace of diamonds on the bottom, which is actually pretty telling though there's 3 aces on these 2 boards. I go ahead and fire another $50 since I can now improve multiple ways on top, and the opponent ends up calling. The river's the 10 of spades on top, bringing a 3rd spade, and 3 of diamonds on the bottom, which is inconsequential, and I end up checking this back because I don't expect worse to be able to call another bet on either board, so the opponent did end up hitting a flush, and we end up chopping this pot. The table has undergone some changes in the lineup over the last half hour or so, and I really haven't seen that many fruitful hands in that time. But now, it's time for another bomb pot. With $120 in on the button, I look down at Queen 10-9-4 double suited in clubs and spades. With flops of 3-9 Jack 2 clubs on top and 7-2-2 2 hearts on the bottom, I flop a lot of equity on one board and nothing on the other. It's checked around to a middle position player who bets $50. There's one call, and Vlog Watcher David next to me is now all in for his last $25 in the dark. I go ahead and call since I only have equity on one board, and we see 2 more calls behind as well. Hielo is alive and well. With $385 in, the turn card on top is the King of Spades, giving me the nut straight, and the King of Diamonds on the bottom. I now have the nuts with a redraw on top, but still nothing on bottom. It's checked around to me, and I'd expect anyone with decent equity to put a bet in, so I fire a pot of $385 to try and take this down. I get a fold before an early position player makes the call, as does the next player who bet the flop. With $1,560 in, the rivers are the 4 clubs on top and the 5 of clubs in the bottom, and I now improve to a flush on top, although it's not the nut flush. In fact, it's not even the second nut flush. This ends up getting checked around, so I go ahead and show my flush on top, and it's good to take half of this massive side pot. David has the king high flush, though, for half of the main pot, and the other player had a single deuce to take the other half of the pot. Seeing a couple limps in front of me, I open 10-9-8-7 double suited in red to $25. There's one call before a player pots it to 110, and the guy behind him calls as well. I'm not liking this going multi-way again, so I go ahead and repot it to $475 with a little over 100 behind, and the other guy puts us all in. The dealer gets the pot right, and guess what happens? I flop the world again! 6 of spades, king of diamonds, 5 of diamonds, a wrap and a flush draw. The turn is the 6 of hearts, which I really didn't want to see, and the river is the ace of diamonds, give me the flush! Oh yeah! Except this time we ran right into aces. Alright, let's reload one more time. I play a few more hands and add on for another $200 when we arrive at another bomb pot. I have King Jack 10-3-1 suit, and we end up seeing flops of Jack 8 deuce rainbow on top and King Jack 3 2 clubs on the bottom. I've got top pair on one board and a mirror on the other. Small blind pots this for $120, the other player calls, and I go ahead and jam for $416 total. It folds to the button who jams, and the other player calls off his stack. We run the boards out with a 7 of clubs and a 2 of spades on top, and 7 of spades and 7 of diamonds on the bottom, and my top 2 pair on the bottom board holds up to take half of this main pot. Oh yeah. The next hand is a doozy. There's a limp for $5, a raise to $10, a re-raise to $25, a call, and I look down at one of the most beautiful hands you can see, 10-9-8-7 double suited and clubs and spades. We can argue for a call here, but in real time, I decide to push this action and 4-bet to 125. We see 2 calls of this bet before the guy who raised to $25 jams for $225 total. This is the exact amount needed to reopen action, and we can argue for just flatting right here, but I go ahead and jam myself, and we see 2 more guys shove all in pre-flop. The dealer gets the pots right, and we see a flop of jack of spades, 8 of diamonds, 3 of spades, and I flop the absolute world, a pair, a wrap, and a flush draw. There's no way I can lose this, right? Right? The turn is the 5 of clubs, and the river is the 4 of clubs. What the hell, man? What the actual hell? This gets scooped by Queen Jack 10-3 1 suit that flopped 2 pair. What the hell? The very next hand I look down at Jack 10-10-8 3 spades and open at $20 over a button straddle and a call. I get 3 calls before the button repots it to 125, and the player on my right ends up calling off his last $90. I go ahead and call the 125 before the next player jams for $200, which doesn't open the action for the 3-better to re-raise it. The player in seat 2 follows the lead and kisses his $200 goodbye before throwing it in, and the guy in seat 3 now jams for about $300 total. With action now reopened, the button repots it, putting me all in, and I just can't ever fold here, getting great pot odds and already having a quarter of my freshly placed stack in the middle. So I go ahead and call it off, and we end up with a pot totaling of around $1,800. Pick me, I say. The dealer gets the pot right, and we are off to 1 board. I go ahead and ask the dealer for quads, and guess what? With a flop of 10-10-4 2 diamonds, it finally happens. I've got this pot locked up. And I end up hitting the high hand for another $400 as well. With one hand, I'm out of Stuckville and into Profitville for the day. Now that's what I'm talking about. Well, that was quite a volatile session. Some of the choices I made during this session can be seen as overly aggressive, and I wanted to address those points. In PLO, equities tend to run really close pre-flop, especially when we are going 4 or 5 ways to a flop. Isolation is a key part of this game, although even when we 3 or 4 bet pre-flop, we're still going multi-way a lot of the time. This game specifically plays as a $500 cap, which is essentially 100 big blinds considering the $5 bring-in, so the game is really short, especially when most of these players are short buying to begin with. The hands that I had decided to be the aggressor with pre-flop were at the very top of our pre-flop range, including those 10-9-8-7 double-suited rundowns, and when plugged into a solver, we're actually ahead in equity versus random 4-card hands these players were going with, including a variety of ace-ace combos that these players showed up with. Connectivity and suits matter, and when those 2 heuristics come together, we can find ourselves in situations that can seem marginal, but are actually great opportunities to push an equity advantage, even if that edge means we will only win 30% of the time in a 4-way all-in pot. As for my news, most of you who know me personally know that I've been smoking cannabis pretty much all day, every day for the past 15 years or so. Cannabis has become a part of my identity, and I use it as a way to escape from the depression and anxiety that I suffered from after my divorce and after being diagnosed with PTSD from some of those events. It took me a long, long time to get over the worst aspects of the depression, and even after I was able to overcome that for the most part, I continue to smoke all day, every day. While I still believe that cannabis has its uses and benefits, I've made the choice to stop smoking regularly. In the past 6 weeks, I've smoked twice with friends and haven't smoked at all in the past 3 weeks. My friends have heard me say repeatedly in that time, reality is weird. Being sober and existing in a state of mind where my mind isn't clouded by cannabis is completely different, and it's a bit jarring, to be honest. While I'm not suffering from any type of physical withdrawals, I've needed to take some time to readjust to this new reality and mental clarity. I found that I now absolutely hate driving and that I can get impatient in a lot of scenarios. But overall, this change has been a net benefit as I'm refocusing my life and daily activities on being productive, setting goals, and personal growth. Speaking of personal growth, I have 2 book recommendations for you, both of which I have read over the last few weeks during my transition to sobriety. The first is Atomic Habits by James Clear, which was recommended to me by the humans over at Crush Live Poker. This book has helped me to not only change the way I approach my daily routines, but to also evaluate my personal goals and eliminate some aspects of my life where I have wasted time or not put forth the necessary effort towards things that mean something to me, including nurturing personal relationships. The second book was a gift from the author, my friend Joey, whom I met at the Run Good series in Jacksonville earlier this year and again encountered in Vegas this summer. The book is titled Bullied and Blind, and Joey rehashes a lot of his personal history and hardships, as well as discusses how he was able to overcome this adversity and find his happy in life. I found his story to be incredibly inspirational, considering that I share a number of parallels with his history, and seeing what an awesome human Joey has become in spite of the hardships has helped me to double down on the choices I've made to be a better human. Thank you all for tuning in. I passed 400 subs on the channel, and I'm getting close to the initial monetization goal soon, so I appreciate your love and support on this journey. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and don't forget, be a good human. I'm Joey Pigtails, and I am transparent, reminding you to always, always be a good human and strive to be better. Bye!